Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Thursday, the 7th of November, 2024. I am Delbridge, Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and this is your status chat. And we have a lot to talk about today, so let's get started. If you like this content, please go to CallDelToSell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you when each Friday's blog has been uploaded. Thank you. Okay, now I have referred to this Atlanta Fed video that was produced, 12 years ago. It's on YouTube. You can find it. I would just type in Atlanta Fed inflation and look for the video. It says the Atlanta Fed explains inflation. And I do want to talk a little bit about this as we go. Let me see if I can make that a full screen. So let's go ahead and hit that go from, obviously, Atlanta Fed. I'll be stopping it periodically.
Prices go up. Today, an ice cream cone costs $2. 50 years ago, that same ice cream cone would have cost 50 cents. What's the difference? Is it tastier? Bigger? No, it's the same. So why does it cost more today? Inflation. When the price level of goods and services goes up over a period of time, we call that inflation. Inflation makes every dollar you own buy a smaller percentage of a product or service, like a hot dog. In the past, $1 would buy a hot dog. Today, $1 would only buy you half. Same thing for a car or a haircut. Prices can change for many reasons. Inflation is a unique type of price change. To understand inflation, we first need to understand something called price level.
Now this is going to be the Federal Reserve Bank's definition of the difference between cost of living expenses and, of course, inflation itself, because we as regular people, we like to just call the entire thing when our money doesn't go as far inflation. But inflation specifically is a specific type of cost. So let's go back to that, hit it again, if I can do that without flashing.
Price level is the average of the current price of everything sold in our economy over time. Hot dogs, haircuts, umbrellas, automobiles, essentially anything that's bought or sold with dollars. Economists keep an eye on the price level because they want the purchasing power of your money to stay stable from year to year. If the price level begins to rise too quickly, central banks, like the Federal Reserve, will try to adjust monetary. Oh,
and by the way, I expect, because of the media coverage and the bad jobs report that the government put out, it disagreed with the other one we looked at. It shows that it was a lot lower, and so we may need to spur the economy on by turning loose a little bit more money.
Policy in order to slow this advance in prices. Okay, so an increase in prices is always due to inflation, right? Wrong. Let's take a closer look. Imagine an island where the only thing to buy is balloons. You've got to use dollars to buy them. Lucky for you, there are 2 balloons to buy and $2 in circulation. So, what's the price of the balloons? $1 each. And if a balloon pops, what's the new price? That price increase isn't an example of inflation. It's a different kind of price change. A change in the cost of living. What's the difference? Well, let's look at another scenario on the same island. Once again, we have 2 balloons and $2, but this time we'll add a central banker who can print money. Changing the amount of money there is to buy balloons will change the price of balloons. So if the central bank decides to print and add another $2, what does that do to the price of balloons? It doubles to $2 each.
You hear that? So when we have more money in the system, if we don't have a corresponding increase in output, if we just print more money, the value of whatever we're buying doesn't really change. It's, pardon me, it's the difference in how many dollars it takes to equal that value, which is what we talk about when we talk about the M2 supply. Now I have the FRED, this is the Federal Reserve economic data from St. Louis. The videos from Atlanta, different district. But here what we see, what we had going on, I've covered this before. This is your M2 money supply. This is the printing of the money. Look what happened right at 2020, right after the election. They shot up, they printed trillions of dollars. What does it say that is? Almost $18 trillion in May. And what was it in the January when they started, February, well, that's fine. Let's go to $15 trillion. So if we go to December, we were at $15 trillion, go to its peak, and we're at 15 to 21. That's going to be about $7 trillion out of that. And that's a huge percentage of that money, obviously. Now, I round it up because it's 696, but we get the idea. Back to our video.
That is inflation. So where does the Federal Reserve come in? For one thing, because central banks, like the Federal Reserve, have control over the money circulating in the economy, they can set the price level, the dollar value of things at whatever level they think is best. But in the real world, the Federal Reserve's role isn't that straightforward. If prices are going up because there's a shortage in cotton, or oil, or even balloons, the Federal Reserve's ability to do anything is limited because it does.
All right, now right there, I want to stop. I want to come up here, go full screen. What? Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat today. I apologize. What did it just say? The Fed can only adjust price level via the money supply. It can't do anything about the cost of living or the supply and demand issues, such as oil. Now, what did we see going into this? We saw that oil prices have typically gone way up. We know what it cost us 4 years ago to buy a gallon of gas, and that's because there was a lot more supply for the demand. And even during the 4 years, they tried to adjust the output of oil and oil products to be proportional to keep that price rate up. Try to keep that supply down, get that price back up. So we have to look at what policies can be done to improve what we regular people call inflation, what our buying power depletes based upon government policy. And then we're going to look at something just a little bit later.
Doesn't produce oil or cotton or balloons. It only produces dollars. On the other hand, if prices are going up because there are too many dollars in the system, the Federal Reserve can do something about that. It can adjust its monetary policies to keep the overall price level steady.
All right, now what they're talking about there is what we use a bunch of time to talk about in these videos. That's quantitative tightening. It means trying to claw back through the government bond issuance and whether or not they let them time out and they don't put them back in service, that type of thing, so to speak. We don't compensate by printing more bonds, which affects that money supply. So we have tightening is trying to draw that money supply down, and easing is to lower things, lower the cost of money, put some more bonds out there, float it out there in the system in order to get more money in the hands of business owners so that they can keep people on the payroll. Let's look at that again. All right, so at this point in time, when they're trying to draw down the money supply right in this area, we are doing quantitative tightening. Now we're beginning to do some easing here by letting it kind of go back up because the government hasn't quit spending money. And a lot of the money that they have, if they haven't actually spent it into existence, it may just be ones and zeros on a computer somewhere within the government. They haven't spent it yet into existence. The only way you get the money into the economy is either you loan it out or spend it out.
Reserve can do something about that. It can adjust its monetary policies to keep the overall price level steady. That is, from rising or falling over time. See, inflation is it's like tire pressure. When tire pressure gets too low, there's not enough air to cushion the ride. When tire pressure gets too high, you can have a blowout. Either way, if the pressure isn't steady at the proper level, it makes for a bumpy ride. So, over time, the right amount of inflation, like steady tire pressure, lets you go the distance and gives the economy a smoother trip. The Federal Reserve keeps an eye on inflation so you can keep your eyes on the road. There's still a lot to learn, so check out the resources on our website at frbatlanta.org.
All right, well, I think that's all the useful part of that video that we want to look at. So when we looked at this, we see that there are two types of cost increases that we as regular people with houses to run and bills to pay and cars to buy are related to either a supply and demand issue, which is that cost of living increase, or their money supply issue. We cannot control the money supply. That's what the Fed does. That's what the FOMC meeting. In fact, we're having one today, and I fully expect that we will get a cut in the cost of money by another 25 basis points. We'll have to see if that happens. So just tying this all together, let's go over here on the left panel and look to see what that has. This is our picture of our home ownership affordability monitor, the HOAM. We know about that. We know about 2020, the election. We changed a bunch of policies. We had the COVID was going around, and they spent I believe this is an economic turn, a crap ton of money, and it took a little while before that started to sink in and cause us trouble. Then we see right about here, 2021, about a year, and it started to cause us trouble. Inflation came up, and we had to then kind of react to that money supply, raising the cost of money, and that of course made inflation skyrocket. They didn't act soon enough, they didn't work hard enough, and we get this mess right here. And from last week's video, we remember that we can't get this particular screen to show back up on the Atlanta Fed. I don't know why they killed it off, but they did. But we see what we had. It was the spending of the money that caused the inflation, that caused the reaction, to raise the rates, and that's what then trickles down through the economy to try to slow that down. Because why? Because we had put so much more money into circulation. You know, here we were normally expecting a rise of a couple of dollars, and the government printed out big bills, big bills. And that's what happened. Remember the thing about the balloons. If there's only $2 in the economy and there are 2 balloons, then the price of a balloon is $1. If we put $4 in the system and there's 2 balloons, then it's $2 a piece. If we pop 1 balloon, then the price of a balloon is $4. I mean, that's the simplest form. We just saw the Atlanta Fed tell us that's how that works. And that gets us to what we're into for the next couple of years. Now here we have what is purported to be the congressional map by counties in the United States that's been assigned. You see how very little blue there is. There's not that much blue, and yet they're about 50% by representative count of people. But look how much of America is then affected by the difference in ideology. One that says we're going to run like a business and we're going to use common sense business properties to run the nation, and those who we think that, well, we just need to control the money supply, who gets the money, what's going on, and that sort of thing. So how can we improve ourselves? Well, that's a pretty good question. And what can we do? We can't really draw down the money supply very effectively without having the rates go high, which affects us in many different ways and hurts us personally, and for a lot of us that aren't just super high level functioning asset class type people. The people who work for a living just know that the prices of everything are going through the roof. So what can we expect for the immediate relief of the future? Because that money supply, as you saw from the Fred example that we have right here. Let me hit it in the center panel full screen. There we have it. We see that we're not going to get this money down anytime soon. It looks like we've already started to do some easing. Edge right here, we're still going in the wrong direction, and I don't know what the future holds. If we go back from after the 2008 housing bubble, we end up having to stimulate the economy to get us out of that recession, and we kept it pretty well much on the same pace. Yes, we spent more money during these years, which includes the 2016 to 2019, gets it all the way to 2020, when we actually end up blowing that money supply out. So what can we do right off the bat? Well, the money supply is going to be harder to tackle. But if we go to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and we see what our CPI index, even though they redefined this to minimize what inflation measured using the CPI itself by changing that basket of goods and going from biennial, which is 2 years, every 2 years using 2 years of data, we went to every 1 year using 1 year of data, which puts, of course, that higher price level into effect over the year-over-year change sooner than if we use 2, where we had a low year and a higher year, and we kind of work those out. It would actually put that year-over-year change in index lower. And so we've changed how we've done it. But, you know, putting a little bit of black ink on x-ray is not going to keep that spot on your lung from being there. So if we look back at this, we see that right now we've mainly gotten our inflation down because energy prices were low. But you know what gas costs today, what your propane costs today, what your gasoline and diesel fuel costs. So the number one thing that I think that we can do immediately is work on our energy policy. Now, if we change our energy policy from this absolutely asinine idea that everything is going to be electric, for which we'd have to double the grid, and we're not building power plants, we're not doing that, so we would just create a future problem. If we went all electric, if we just keep our gasoline engines, we can put Detroit back to work. We can start to bring maybe some of those car costs down, because if you followed any of the news about Ford and Stellantis, many of these car makers, GM in particular, is very poorly run, GM is. But with that, we're going to do everything electric. They had to dump so much money into trying to conquer a problem that really can't be fixed because, you know, physics, the physics of how things work, that they wasted so much money, and that brought the cost of the regular gasoline and diesel engines kind of based cars way up high because they have to make the money to kind of cover some of that loss. So what can we do? Well, we can drill, baby, drill. We can change that because even though we can't get a gas well put in and we can't get an oil well put in immediately, we can change the futures, the oil futures, energy futures, by having more exploration and development underway and getting going. It may take a couple of years for that to go, but just knowing that there's more supply coming will start to bring down the higher prices that we have. And we know that the cost of energy goes into all of these groups. It goes into the major categories, it goes into the minor categories, it goes into the food as well. So if we have energy here and we have food, the cost of food, it didn't miracle itself right across the state line. It didn't come from California, from the lettuce fields in California. It had to be trucked or driven by train on so we get the energy prices going down. That should immediately start to help with fuel prices directly. We expect that there will be a lag before the prices catch up. And you can go to, I think it is the China Observer online and look at their videos. They are obviously a YouTube channel that looks at economic events in China. And they said many years ago that China decided, they saw what OPEC could do with their demand of being able to control markets. And they like that flex and they wanted, what can we do? They do have a lot of lithium salts. So they set up to do lithium ion batteries. That's one. And then we want to do EVs because batteries go into EVs and they have low labor rates. So they wanted to corner the market on EVs, and they want to do solar panel. And you might think, well, China's Communist Party that runs their economy didn't pick on windmills. And I don't know if that's because a windmill is so flipping huge that it would take so much money to cargo ship that over to the United States or what. But they did point out, according to the China Observer, that they wanted to dominate EVs, batteries, lithium-ion batteries, and solar panels. And what do we see? One of the parties going in with a brand new Green Deal, the Green New Deal. Well, we're going to just outlaw cars. We're going to outlaw the combustion engine. Well, that hurts parts of our country that, they need jobs to pay their mortgages and to feed their family and to do everything else. And the other way that we get people to adopt EVs is by running up the cost of oil. All right, now this is Politico, and I show you the source. You can look this up. Choose Europe gas, quote, haunts the White House. Now, what is the date on this publication? This goes back to 2008. Can you think of anything that happened in 2008 that may have affected shelter costs, people's jobs, lives of things? We see, well, basically another attack on energy. And here we have President Barack Obama's energy secretary unwittingly created a durable GOP talking point in September of 2008 about the benefits of having gasoline prices rise over 15 years to encourage energy efficiency. Now here's the money shot right here. Somehow, Chu said we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels of Europe. Let's put that on the full screen and let's go ahead and make that shot a little bit bigger so that we know that Odell didn't make this up. Somehow, right there, Chu said we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels in Europe. So we now need to ask ourselves, is part of our economic problem a policy problem? And if it's a policy problem, we can start to counteract that by not having a war on oil. I mean, I'm not saying don't buy an EV if you don't want one, but if the goal was to create a circumstance that would make fuel prices go through the roof so that we can sell electric cars, so that we can make China happy, if in fact there are some relationships with that particular party and China, such as Mr. Tim and his travels to China. We have to look at President Clinton giving favorable nation status to China, which dropped some of the tariffs and things to make China have a better opportunity to sell products in the United States. If there is some sort of thing that we don't know, maybe conspiracy theory, we'll have to change our hats for tinfoil hats. But if you see with your own eyes that this goes back to the last time we had a housing problem was because they wanted high gas prices. So what is the best way that you do that? you cut into energy production in the United States. So let's go back over to our left panel and look at that screen again. Well, this much of America is based in an ideology that might just want to see lower energy costs, lower inflation, whether we call it cost of living or we actually call it money supply issues. One of those two things, we have a better shot through changing our ideology, our ideas of how we're going to run things, from war on energy and the middle class to let's get our energy down. That will eventually trickle into the cost of inputs on everything, because everything needs energy and it doesn't get from the farm to the table without using fossil fuels. So if we can drop that down, it feels like we have help on the way. Now, how much does it matter whether you're red or blue if you're in the decision-making power? Well, if there's no distinguishing factors between the two ideologies and you've been there a very long time and you like making money and you have inside information or you have knowledge, pre-knowledge, let's say, of how things go. Let's take this example, particularly with the green energy. Now, if we don't have high gas prices and we're not leaning in that direction, we might have an effect over what gets purchased. Now, in this case, this is a Bama glass, Land Before Time 4. It's a collector's item, worth a lot of money. Actually, no, it's just a jelly jar that I had from when the kids were kids, and we use these little jars. But this isn't worth a lot because the inherent value is it's just glass. Whether it's got anything on it or not, we might have some collectability to it, which it's a Bama jar, so it's not going to have that. But what if I could make it somehow by passing a law in Washington that says you could not drink out of any other glass other than this right here, and you had to buy this glass? Well, if there's a limited supply of that, and I invested in a company that were making these jar glasses just that way to fit the law, then I can invest in it before anybody knew about it, and then when we passed a law like green new energies, people would have to buy something that I was invested in. I can make a lot of money. Same way like the Visa lawsuit. We have Nancy Pelosi's husband dumps $500,000 of Visa stock right before the DOJ hit the Visa card processing company with major fines and dropped the price. So if you know where to throw your seeds, you can grow a lot of corn. So looking back at our energy pricing, if we can make gasoline so expensive to European levels at $5 or $6 a gallon, and we already invested in electrics, well, we can make what is that economic term? A crap ton of money. So what do we do for all of us? How does that affect our jobs? Like I say, in the Rust Belt, in Detroit, and all the people, in every bit of food and everything that one price, the price of energy goes into, makes everything go up. And on top of that can cause supply chain shortages, which is another type of issue. You know, if we're having trouble getting the objects from one location to the other, can make that cost go up, as well as the fact that we're printing money like it means nothing. Now, why would they print the money? All right, let's say that this represents the money supply, M to money supply. This is what's floating around out there. Well, if I'm in D.C. and I pass a bunch of money on the bills through the House because they have to originate the cost, if I pass those bills and the Senate approves it, we're just waiting for that slush fund of money to make its way into the economy. We can't spend it all at once because that would really shock the economy. So we kind of trickle it out over about 3 or 4 years. But to the government, if they print $100, if that's the money supply, and we print 2 more, that will water down the value of a single dollar. And if you're an old folk like me and you've got a retirement plan, that kind of makes your prices, what your dollars are, they go down in value. Now, your house may go up in value because it kind of rides with inflation, but you get taxed every year from the time you have it to the time you sell it. So you're paying more money even though they tell you it's worth a lot. If you're not wanting to sell it, that extra money they say it's worth ain't helping you a bit. But if the government can print 2 more dollars and it's only worth 80 cents a piece, they got $1.60 for nothing. They got $1.60 free of charge. Even though it says $2, they get $1.60 worth of buying, and you still only have your savings. And they went down to say 80% during that time frame, and you didn't necessarily get any more. Maybe you got it on your house, but that's, what Grandma used to call being house poor. All my money's in my house, or farm poor. A lot of people have a lot of money on the tax records, but it's tied up in their farm. So there are a lot of game playing, and a lot of people that are into the system on either side that have been there a long time play the game while me and you and our children and grandchildren, our mothers and our fathers, the people in our lives, our wives and significant others, whatever we have, we pay the price for them playing the game. So let's look at today's numbers like we always do. Hello, I'm Delbridge of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel, CallDelToSell. That's one L and Del, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today. All right, last week, 10/31/24, we had 24,363 in the opportunities. That dipped from the previous period. We had 3989 in the under contract still showing. That's the ones they're holding on to. They got a contract, but they're technically semi-bound, waiting on that contract. That dipped down a little bit, and the ratio fell to 16%. Now this week, we have 24,062, which is a continuing falling of the availables. And we had 3814 in the under contract still showing. That fell as of what they're holding on to, but the ratio remained the same at 16%. And we do know that we look at our prices in a way that they are cyclic. We've seen that in previous episodes. So it's very important when we value a house that we really have good comps based upon a very short period, because if we're going into the winter, prices are falling, and if we were to go back too far, we'd catch them on the rise. And if we go too far in the spring, we're still catching up on a little bit lower prices where we've kind of gone down for our April, our big month of April that we come in. So the prices do change. We have to evaluate them based upon the previous sales, not what the tax man said it was worth when they did their evaluation. So anyway, that's it. I hope you don't take this as being too political. I'm not being political. I'm talking economics and the things that drive our nation. And I also want you to have some hope that we may, if we did nothing else but reverse the energy policy, that's going to help us, I believe. And if we can put some more jobs back into the automotive states, of which Tennessee's one of them, if we can get some more sales going, if we can dump that EV mandate and that nonsense, then our car companies don't have to waste as much money trying to develop a car for some arbitrary, everything has to be, or 50% of the cars have to be electric by a certain date, and we know we're not building the grid up to compensate for them anyway. So let's go with what works, and we'll see you next week.